Okay, it's just about 2 o'clock and we're seeing the numbers increase. So I'm so happy people are rejoining. We just had a wonderful healthcare session, a wellness break. I thought it was amazing. And so it's actually related to the question that's going to be used for the gift bag. For the first 3 or so people that can respond in the chat, or if you prefer, you can raise your hand if you'd like to speak directly. To those first individuals will go the spoils. We have a physical gift bag that we're going to mail to your address. So are you ready for the question? All right. The question is, what is your favorite self-care practice these days? You can share in the chat or you can raise your hand. I see, whoa. Okay, and we're pausing. Yes, the prizes. This is wonderful. This is incredible. So let's take a look at some of these. I see Reiki, a nice walk, sleep, mindfulness. Let's continue. Napping. I love that one too. Meditation. A couple people in meditation. Reading. Setting firm boundaries. Skating. Yoga. Oh, wow. Skating on the Rideau Canal. Listening to music. Cooking. Stretching. Let's keep it going. Yes. Dancing. Stargazing. Gratitude journal. Cardio workout. Writing poetry. And so let's keep it rolling because absolutely these are key components of keeping us re-energized and focused. So to those of you who were the first, let's say 5 to 7 that responded in the chat, congratulations. We'd love to send you a gift bag. The instructions to receive it, we have an email. So just send us an email, info@youthrex.com. Please include in the subject line gift bag and send us the address you would like us to ship the gift bag to. So thank you again for everybody that contributed. These are wonderful. If you have more ideas, feel free to continue sharing. This is great. I definitely want to thank all of the participants from the first session, from Jean and Renalyn, Jada, very powerful movements and words and meditations. Caitlin, Nicole, Kim, and Marquez, thank you so much for the words of knowledge you shared. If anybody is joining us that has missed the first session, this is going to be recorded and you will be able to watch it after the fact, which is amazing. Just some other quick housekeeping notes. We do have a live translation happening. So in the very bottom of the Zoom bar, you'll see interpretation. You can click on that if you'd like to have the live French translation accessible to you. And we also have a transcript that we're going to put in the chat box, a transcript recording that we're going to enable shortly for you to be able to access. That link will also be available in the top left corner. And so that's just a little bit of housekeeping. We appreciate everybody that has the microphones muted right now as we prepare to go into the discussion. If you have any questions that come up, feel free to use the chat. Did I get everything, Katie? Is there anything I'm missing?
I think that's everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a lot of great things to get through today, so we don't want to delay any further, and we'll get started right away. I'll be introducing this afternoon's keynote speaker, and it's an honor to do so. So Larissa Crawford is a restorative circle keeper, published Indigenous and anti-racism researcher, award-winning ribbon skirt artist, and proudly passes on Métis and Jamaican ancestry to her daughter Zaira. She's the founder of Future Ancestry Services, a youth-led professional services social enterprise that operates at the intersection of climate and racial justice. And for more information about that organization, check out futureancestors.ca. It's in the chat. And among their 140 diverse clientele are small youth-led collections and nonprofits, Canada's most influential law firms, publishing houses, and some of the highest offices of the Canadian government. Through programs such as CoreX Climate Justice, the Action Canada, and the Youth Climate Lab Future Exchange Fellowships, and now the Raven Trust Capital Fireweed Fellowship, Larissa continues her learning of Northern Indigenous climate knowledge, climate policy, anti-racism opportunities, environmentalism, and doing business with traditional and decolonizing approaches. Welcome, Larissa.
Hello. Now just ask that. Yes, awesome. So you stopped sharing. So now I can share. There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second keynote for this session. I just have to say I've really enjoyed staying on for the entirety of this day. It's been really great to just hear so many different perspectives on mentorship. I really resonated with the poetry that was shared by Jada earlier today. So please, if you've missed anything that happened earlier this morning, make sure to check out the recording for the rest of the sessions today. So Welcome to Decolonizing Our Relationships to Mentorship and the Value of Lived Experience. It's one of my favorite topics. And so, Larissa, here, actually, I'm going to open up and start here. I want to start with an acknowledgement of relationship to land, because I think it is important to share that today, even before I introduce myself. And I like opening spaces with relationship to land and discussions of this, because what I'm going to share here is going to be very relevant for the rest of what I talk about. So Robin Wall Kimmerer shared in Braiding Sweetgrass, highly recommend the book. In the settler mind, land was property, real estate, capital, or natural resources. But to our people, it was everything: identity, the connection to our ancestors, the home of our non-human kinfolk, our pharmacy, our library, the source of all that sustained us. What I really love about what Robin did in this section, and in these few words, is she articulated how one's worldview will shape a different relationship. In this case, a relationship to land. We have one worldview that is one we are all familiar with. It's enshrined in the way our country is governed. It's enshrined in law. It's enshrined in many of the ways that academia function, where our relationship to land is shaped into one where it's something to extract from. It's this non-human being. And again, that shapes a relationship. That worldview shapes a relationship to the land. Now, there are different worldviews, and those shape different relationships to land. One where we see land as an extension of self, as a teacher, as a place where we house language and we learn language. Now, what we see and where we see so much harm caused, especially in academia, is when one worldview is positioned as the one only legitimate worldview and its corresponding relationships. Where, for example, non-Western worldviews and cultures are often deemed as invaluable, too biased, nice to have at best. Oftentimes we present cultural teachings and information, traditional knowledge of environment, and we're often forced to present that information that is also supported by Western ways of thinking and worldview. It's not enough. It doesn't carry the merit to stand on its own. It needs to be supported by academic research. It needs to be supported by what a white Western scientist says. There's a skill of understanding our worldview. There's a skill of naming our worldview, because none of us are unbiased. We all have bias, and that is shaped by our worldview. And as I go through today and share some things that may not totally align with everything presented today on mentorship, I want to highlight here that our worldviews shape our relationships, in this case, in the context of what we talk about, to mentorship. And there's a skill of understanding how our worldview shapes our relationships. And it's important to be aware of that, to seek to understand it, so that we can come to spaces where people maybe have different worldviews, and we're able to navigate those conversations and relationships. We're able to respect and honor the validity of other worldviews and corresponding relationships. So I just wanted to open with that as we go throughout today. So as for me, Larissa Crawford Calgary, New York, puis mi famille Penetangweshin, puis Jamaica, New York. Bonjour, je m'appelle Larissa. J'ai une ascendance métisse de Penetangweshin et une ascendance afro-caribéenne de Jamaïque. Je suis à Calgary. S'il vous plaît, si vous voulez faire tes questions en français, tes notes en français, tes commentaires en français, s'il vous plaît, faites-le. Hey, I'm Larissa. I introduced myself first in Michif Cree and then in French, and those are two of my ancestral languages. I'm currently calling from Calgary, Alberta, so Treaty 7 territory, the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda nations, as well as Métis Nation Homeland Region 3. And it's important for me to name this because it's the original caregivers and my relationship to the original caregivers have really shaped my understanding of mentorship and what I'll be speaking to today. Anishinaabeg teachings have also very much shaped my understanding of mentorship and relational mentorship. I lived in Toronto for 7 years, studied at York University, and I just want to acknowledge some of the sources of the knowledge I'll be sharing today. Now you can learn more about me in the slide deck, but at the meantime, that's all I wanted to speak about to myself. I will be speaking a bit to Future Ancestor Services as we go along. It's a Black, Indigenous, owned and led organization. We're a team of all youth, disabled and neurodivergent, Black, Indigenous, and or racialized, majority queer organization. We have an amazing team and we work very differently from most consulting firms. And so I'll speak a bit about that throughout the presentation. But really what I want to talk about today is reimagining the roles and values that we have in mentorship relationships. What I will be speaking to is maybe very different from your understanding of what mentorship should be. I'm going to speak to some of the harm of mentorship as it's been positioned and executed in academia especially. I'm going to be doing this and making this presentation with the intention of you leaving with very tangible tools and practices that you can apply in your mentorship program, in your mentorship relationships, even tonight. In having worked at the Aboriginal Student Center at York University, where this was definitely something that we talked about, it was part of my role as a student there at some point. And I think it's very relevant for so much of, again, what we do in academia. And I hope that especially the young people on this call leave with an understanding of how you bring so much value to a mentorship relationship as well. Now, I'm going to be, I just added in another section, and so it isn't perfectly formatted right now, but I'm going to start with understanding decolonization and having the discussion about that. Then we're going to look into decentralizing learning, and this is really where we can find mentors when we're thinking about identifying people that we want to have a mentorship relationship with. And then we'll go into articulating your values and needs for respect. So once we get into a mentorship relationship, what are ways that we can communicate the way that we need to be respected in a safe and honorable way? And then finally, asserting your lived experience. This is especially important for younger people, for people who maybe don't carry all the academic qualifications that we often look for in a mentor. In this section, I really want to speak to how we carry so much value in how we are able to articulate and what we've learned from our lived experiences. So I'm going to share a bit of tips and a bit of practices for how we can reflect on that and then communicate that to people around us and to aspiring mentors and mentees. So first, what is decolonization and how does it relate to my life? What does it have to do with mentorship? I want to start here because I know decolonization is thrown around a lot, but it always, it doesn't surprise me anymore, but it used to surprise me how many people actually couldn't say what it is on the spot. So I just want to give a very comprehensive definition of decolonization. I want to highlight that this is one vision of decolonization. There are many. But this is how I like to understand decolonization. It aims to unpack the impact of colonization on a very fundamental level. It emphasizes power differences and assigns constant attentiveness to colonial influences. So to the living legacies of colonialism. I use that term a lot, the living legacies of colonialism, because so often we talk about colonialism, we even say neocolonialism. And to say that, oh, colonization is in the past, it suggests that colonization happened, we're doing something different now. But the reality is so many of these legacies are living today and have shaped into new experiences of many of the same practices guised as entrance exams and different ways of the ways that our institutions function. But I want to get specific because I know this is pretty theoretical. And before I get there, I just want to mention that decolonization, and this really helps me understand decolonization. It's a means to the end, but not the end. Our goal is just not to decolonize everything and then we're good. If we think about decolonization as taking away and unpacking the impacts of colonization, well, now we're creating this void. And this void is often where we can see indigenization take place, where now we're creating space for maybe indigenous ways of knowing to emerge and shape the way that we exist and the spaces we exist within. The process of indigenization. But we cannot do that until we've unpacked, acknowledged, and addressed those colonial influences. Now, sometimes this work is done side by side, but we need to recognize that we need to first unpack and understand those, the way that colonial legacies influence how we exist today. Now, another important point is that it cannot just exist in academia. And a lot of us are comfortable with writing about decolonization on paper, in policy, in strategic planning. But when it comes to actually living it, that's where it can get a bit more uncomfortable. That may be where you see more consequences on your norm and on other people's norm. And so I'm gonna just share a really quick example to explain how decolonization can be lived through the way that we exist. And I'm gonna speak to relationship to time. I really love this topic. Relationship to time is absolutely fascinating. Many of us exist with a very similar relationship to time where it's very deadline oriented, a lot of urgency in a lot of the spaces we exist within, especially academia. But it's really important to understand that we have not always existed like this, and that time was specifically used as a tool of colonization, as a tool of dehumanization, targeting Indigenous peoples around the world. Now, by the beginning of the 19th century, especially in British society, we're seeing a movement toward this correlated notion of civilization and true religion, and the accurate and profitable use of time. So we're seeing a capitalist industrial society emerge from Britain. We're seeing colonization and colonies being set up around the world. And we're seeing time being used as a way to establish superiority in Western society, British Western society, Euro Western society. We're seeing time being used as a way to say our culture and the way we exist is superior because this is what civilization means. This is what true religion means. This is what a Christian society should look like, and it should be positioned as the ideal. Now, what we saw here was that this is a way, this was a tool that was used to dehumanize, for example, many African societies. It was used in what is currently Canada to dehumanize indigenous ways of being, where they saw that we didn't use time in the same way. There's more time for rest. Our understanding of a valuable use of time was not always associated with how productive can we be in the amount of time that we have. It was a very different understanding and use of time. And so it was used as a way to depict my ancestors as culturally inadequate, as in need of civilization. Now, this is really important to acknowledge. And again, you have the citations in the slide deck, and I'll share it at the very end. But what you see here is this process of, like sometimes we hear indigenous or African time, like native time, Indian time, or African time. Like those are real things. Those are valid experiences. And what we're talking about there is a different experience in relationship to time. And so it's a two-edged sword, and that's what we see in history as well. It was a two-edged sword. We saw, again, this tool of colonization used to dehumanize indigenous societies. But we also saw indigenous communities using this and flipping it on their head, and using these practices and these tools of clocks to govern a society on its head. And that's where I really get excited about this idea of the colonization and decolonization of our time, because we can do different things. For example, I can use my calendar, which is a colonial, it's a colonial time tool. I can use my calendar as a way to block off time to rest. I don't work on Mondays. This is a very rare instance where I work on a Monday. And so I use that as a way to protect my time so that I can use my time as I see as valuable, which is being on the land, which is going to my doctor's appointments. Those are valuable uses of time for me. And I'm able to use tools like the calendar, like out of office emails, to assert and protect the way I value using my time. Now, I can speak on this for hours and hours and hours. I just wanted to use this as an explanation and as an exploration for how, one, the legacy of the colonization of our time is living today. It shapes the way that we exist. So many of our clients at Future Ancestor Services are impeded by urgency culture. Workplace boundaries are not respected. Time on the land is not considered as a valuable use of employees' time. There are so many ways that this shapes and creates barriers for different cultural experiences of time in our society and in our spaces. Now, again, there's going to be a couple linked opportunities to learn more about this and explore more of this. And I'm going to share some tools in the next couple minutes where we can assert and explore what this means to us. But I just wanted to share that we can do things in our life right now to participate in the decolonization of, for example, time. And it's so important that we put these practices into play in our lives, so they're not reduced to a thesis statement. So they are not reduced to a policy that collects dust at a university. We really need to spend the time thinking about how this relates to how we exist today. Now let's take this act of decolonization and think about mentorship, the history of mentorship. Just like our relationship to time has been shaped by colonized histories, so too has our understanding of mentorship. Traditional rule-oriented models of mentoring rest on assumptions of individualism and meritocratic academic hierarchy that spring from the history of colonization. They lack historical context and an understanding of the discourses of power and belonging that can trouble any relationship. Because it is born from and woven in the fabric of time-honored Eurocentric academic approach to training and guiding proteges, traditional mentoring is capable of neither disrupting dominant norms or overcoming structures that limit relational possibilities. Now that's a mouthful. This is coming from Inspire's literature review on decolonizing and indigenizing mentorship. But what they share here is that the hierarchical traditional model of mentor-mentee relationship, where the relationship is only scoped within the work that is being done and fails to acknowledge the context within which this mentorship relationship is existing, that fails to acknowledge the power dynamic that exists, we see harm time and time again play out. And it is often the mentees, the younger students, who are harmed. Now, if you want a deeper dive into the harm of the traditional kind of mentorship dynamics that we see in academia, I highly recommend reading this report. Again, it's in the slide deck, as it does do a very comprehensive analysis of, again, the harm that is created, especially for Black, Indigenous, and racialized mentees through the traditional Western Eurocentric understanding of mentorship. Now, what this literature review really highlights, and what I really enjoyed reading about it, was this idea of cultural safety. And this idea is reflected also in a really amazing mentor guidebook that the Indigenous Students Office at the University of Manitoba put together. And so I'll read a point, especially about cultural safety and our understanding of mentorship relationships. Cultural safety is a concept that recognizes that there are power imbalances in every relationship. This can be seen as a residual element of colonization. The concept of cultural safety may be easier to understand by considering the opposite. For example, many of the traditional mentorship opportunities that at least I've been presented with and that I've seen in the past, the culturally unsafe practices are any actions that diminish, demean, or disempower the cultural identity and well-being of an individual. This is a big one. This is a big one. Because so often, especially again, when students are put into mentorship relationships, there's this understanding that we can do the work separate from the racism that these students experience. We can do this work separate from the history of colonization and perhaps how residential schools influenced my relationship to education, my access to these kind of opportunities, the way that I'm able to come to a space when news cycles become traumatizing. Oftentimes, in a traditional mentorship relationship, when we're only focusing on the work, and when we are failing to recognize that we're doing this work within a dominant and within an institution or space, where maybe the mentor's worldview is reflected in the way that that space operates, well, then we're causing harm to those who carry different lived experiences, to those who carry different worldviews. When a relationship is culturally safe, both the student and the mentor can discuss their experiences. Baby, one moment. Yeah. When a relationship is culturally safe, both the student and the mentor can discuss their experiences and feelings around issues of culture and race with the confidence of knowing they will not be judged or ridiculed. The relationship will respect, value, and honor the differences that may exist between mentor and student, being mindful that these differences provide an opportunity for joint learning and growth. So again, the mentor guidebook from the University of Manitoba does an amazing job at explaining, again, this idea of cultural safety and what it has to do with mentorship. And that if we really are committed to decolonizing mentorship relationships, then this needs to be a consideration. It cannot just be about the work. Because I go to work, I leave work, and there are experiences, there are realities that I can't just leave at the door when I'm working. And so many mentorship programs and supports are structured in a way where that's the assumption, that we can just leave it at the door, do our work in a mentor-mentee relationship, and not have to carry those realities within that space where I'm working. So again, this literature review and the, I think, yeah, right here. The literature review and the and the mentor guidebook, these bottom two documents, I highly recommend. If you want to see the research on the decolonization of time, there's the article and then our policy statement at Future Ancestor Services, where we articulate what it looks like in business to operate with a decolonized understanding of time. So there are a couple of resources for y'all. Now, exploring decentralized learning and opportunities. This is something I want to speak to right quick because this is really relevant to my mentors and how I found my mentors. And I see that these slides got switched around, so here we are. Where can I find mentors? This is something I'm often asked by students and something I really wanted to share. In terms of decentralizing learning, so yes, we have our program, like our academic programs. Yes, we have those. But the decentralized learning opportunities are often where we're going to find our most employable skills. And it's where we can find and where we can access, especially decolonized ways, indigenized ways of education and learning. Because these big institutions like universities, it takes a long time to change an organizational culture there. It takes a long time to change curricula across a program. There's a lot of work. And so a lot of these institutions are slow to responding to the needs of diverse students, to the experiences of diverse students. And it's often the decentralized learning opportunities where we can get relevant content, where we can access mentors, where we can explore our different interests and skills. And this is what I really want to talk about as we kind of dive into the more concrete practices part of my presentation. So this presentation is dedicated to Dr. Lauren Foster and Ruth Colazar Green. Now, they're both professors at York University. They do so much more. But these are two of my most cherished mentors. And I often get asked, how do you find mentors? Like, how do you find people who can really support you in your journey throughout an academic experience beyond just one small program, beyond just one class? And so I'll share a bit about how I was able to connect with both of them. Dr. Lauren Foster, I met at a session that he was giving at York University. It was a very small session in an obscure part of the campus. It took a long time to find. There was a good group of people there. But one thing I want to say is that to students, at the beginning of my experience as a student at York University, I made a commitment, and I kept it for all 5 years I was a student, that every month I would go to a session or a workshop that the university offered that was outside of my initial kind of interests. And so I went to so many different kinds of presentations. I sat in so many different audiences. And I got a real breadth of like what was out there. What could I be doing with my degree? How could I be pursuing research? So I met Dr. Lauren Foster at one of those kind of monthly commitments I had. And I went up to him after the presentation. I was so taken aback by the work that he was doing. And there was a long lineup of people waiting to speak to Dr. Foster. And they were constantly asking things from him. They want to pick his brain on this. They want this, they want this, they want this. And I was at the very end and I asked, what can I do for you? How can I support your work? And from there, I was able to join several committees at the university. I ended up leading quite a bit of a number of projects on anti-racism tools and policies for the university. And I began one of my most cherished mentorship relationships with Dr. Lauren Foster. I did not grow up with a Black male role model. I never had one until I met Dr. Lauren Foster. And it was so much more than the research, but he showed me what was possible, that you could have more revolutionary thoughts and more revolutionary intentions and still succeed. You could shape the world the way you are being told by your community. You can shape institutions in a way that is grounded in what the community is saying we need and want, and still succeed. So I really appreciated this relationship. It really helped me get, several paid opportunities after leaving university. But it was this relationship and an understanding of a relationship beyond the research that really helped me succeed as a student. And it started with, what can I do for you? I recognize I have value. How can I bring my value to your work? How can I support you in what you're doing? With Ruth Kolazar, I met her by volunteering on several committees at the university. I met her through spending time in the Indigenous Student Center. I met her because I recognized what she was doing, and again, coming to that relationship with, what can I do for you? You are one of the most inspiring women I have ever met. How can I support your work? How can I learn from you? How can I support what you're doing? So I didn't want to spend too much time on this, but I did want to share how decentralized learning opportunities are really where I was able to find mentors that I value so much. And these are some of the questions that I would ask myself as I would kind of enter these mentorship relationship. What is my monthly capacity to do unpaid work? How much time per month do I need to spend in looking for these opportunities? And again, how often am I asking, what can I do for you? And positioning myself as also having value in a mentorship relationship. Now, there are several resources, especially YouthREX and Mentor Canada. Here are a couple other opportunities that you can explore and resources. Now, the next two are going to go pretty quickly, and then we can spend some time for questions and answers. So I just want to flag, if you have any questions, please start thinking about them now, as we're about 10 minutes away from that Q&A. What does respect look like to me, and what are my values, and what are the consequences of honoring them? This is so important. Again, mentors and mentees, when we think about a mentorship relationship, it is equally important for both or all parties to communicate what respect looks like to us in this relationship. So important to do that. As a student, this is Zyra's chilling in the back. I don't know if y'all can see her, but this is her when she was 12 days old. She's so big now. But she started, not when she was 12 days old, but this is her in class. She started going to class at 12 days old. And I had a lot of different needs from a lot of my peers. I started my 4th year, 8 months pregnant. I had her in November, so pretty early on in the semester. And she went through 2 full years of school. And I had different needs for respect as a student. And so what I did was I went into all of my TAs and professors' offices, and I explained to them, this is how I need to be respected as now a new mother and a student. I need to bring her into these spaces. How can I do this in a way that respects you? And we had very open conversations about what respect looked like to us in this situation. This completely shaped the way I could access my education while being a new mother. Now, I also have several disabilities. I have chronic pelvic inflammatory disease. I have endometriosis. I'm recovering from a brain bleed. And I have pelvic floor dysfunction. So I got a lot of things going on. I have quite a bit of disabilities. Again, this shapes my needs for respect. My team all knows that I constantly have doctor's appointments. They know that I have 9 out of 10 pain days. And so my needs for respect look like honoring the time that I need to take away from work to heal so that I can come back and be my full self. but we have to have those open conversations. And oftentimes there isn't space for us to name, I have a disability and this is the way it's going to shape the way I come to this space. Oftentimes that space isn't created for us. But when we have a dialogue about what respect looks to each of us, well, there's a space that's created for us to name the different ways that our lived experiences are going to shape the way that we come to that relationship. Now, I really like talking about respect because I hate the saying like respect others the way you want to be treated or treat others the way you want to be treated. No, because my needs for respect, the way I need to be treated does not look the same as so many other people. And to do so is to position your lived experience and your worldviews as superior to the others that have different needs and worldviews. So please stay away from treat others the way you want to be treated. And instead open space for everyone to name the way they need to be treated. This is a very proactive way of mitigating conflict. And it's a way that we can honor the needs of students and the needs of people, especially in spaces where we are not respected by default. University spaces are not created in a way where I'm respected by default. I often had to find those spaces in the decentralized learning opportunities. Those institutions were not created for me or my ancestors. And so I am not respected by default. And when we fail to create space to name the way we need to be respected differently, then we are assuming that everyone has those same needs and that we are meeting them. And this is something that I'm very aware of because, again, I'm not usually respected by default in most of the spaces I go into. If you're really struggling to name what you need for respect because you are respected by default in most spaces, that's something to think about too. That's something to name. These are a couple of the questions that can help us explore this for ourselves. And it's something that we can throw back and ask those around us when we're thinking about how we need to be respected. Now, there are several resources for this kind of strategic planning, this kind of self-reflection. I want to highlight just two of them. Our statement on the our directions of respect, so kai de miu tau. So everyone in at Future Ancestor Services has these directions of respect. It's very fluid. We update them as we need, sometimes contract to contract, and we actually give these to our clients. And we say, this is the way that you need to respect me and my time as we work together in this relationship. This is something that's very, very healthy to do with a new kind of mentorship relationship, so that we're making sure we're honoring the ways that we exist, and that we're holding space to sometimes name the more uncomfortable things. I've had new team members share information in here that's brought me to tears, that would have not otherwise been named had they not been given this opportunity to write it out and communicate to everyone. And what's amazing about these kind of guidelines of respect is that we now hold people accountable. You've agreed that you've read this, you will do your best to honor it. And if you don't, then I have a way to bring this conversation back and a way that I can hold you accountable to respecting me. It's a really key piece, especially when there are power dynamics at play. And again, this is one of the very defining ways of how we work at Future Ancestor Services. All of us have existed in institutions that were not made for us, and we have experienced and been traumatized in so many ways that we can't go back to those spaces. And so Future Ancestor Services really was born out of the harm and hope that we have for moving forward in this idea of existing and doing business differently. Now, I'll wrap up so that we can get to questions and answers, but dialogue really. But my last point is on how does my lived experience contribute to my qualification and value? This is so important. If I present anything that you leave with today, please leave with this. is this idea of understanding our lived experience as qualification. When I worked at the Ontario Ministry of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, I came in and I was the only Indigenous person in the office. I was one of 2 Black people in the office. And the reason I got that position was because I made the argument and I made the case for how existing as an Indigenous woman, existing as a Black woman in this society, in investing in my communities and understanding the research and understanding our needs, this qualifies me to come in and do this policy review, to do advising differently than from those who do not carry that lived experience. That is a qualification. They didn't ask for that, but you better believe I told them that. My experiences qualify me to relate to communities differently than a non-Indigenous person. My experiences and the investment I placed in my research and education qualify me to come in and think differently when we're creating a policy, when we're creating a grant. Oftentimes there isn't space for us to name how our lived experiences qualify us. And so we have to name it. We have to create that space. And sorry, this is just a shot of me when I worked at the Ontario Ministry of Energy. And again, Zyra is very involved. But there were so many reasons I was able to secure this position, but I was told that my most employable skills came from what I was able to articulate with regards to my lived experiences. I had my daughter for 2 years, my last 2 years of university, my most difficult years of university, and was able to graduate summa cum laude. I was able to graduate with the best scores I've ever had. And it was because I had to learn skills of multitasking, of time management. I had to be very intentional with the way I spent the little time I had to study. I said that in the interview, and that's what made me employable. They didn't ask for that, but that's what I told them they need to see as being valuable. Now, there are a lot of different ways that we can do this. Here are some reflection questions that I regularly go to, that I regularly look at when I'm writing an application, when I'm writing a biography. How does my lived experience contribute to my qualifications? What barriers have I been faced with, and how have I adapted and grown to overcome them? When I haven't, what did I learn from this? This is shifting our mindset away from victimhood towards, I have become more qualified to do and exist differently. We need to think about that, articulate it, practice saying it out loud, practice writing biographies and applications that say this, and then live by it. This has really helped me in navigating the racism and ableism I've experienced in spaces, the ageism I've experienced in spaces where I walk into a boardroom to consult on a project. People would hear that I'm 23 and then kind of laugh me out. And so this really helps, not only with the relationship, but with our understanding of self-worth and decolonizing our understanding of self-worth. Now, there are a couple examples. This is an example of an application for a fellowship program where I did exactly that. I articulated how overcoming barriers in the energy sector with regards to my race and communities, how that made me qualified to be a part of the fellowship. It's a very difficult fellowship to get into, and I was able to get into it because they saw how I articulated, again, my lived experiences having value. And this ended up becoming one of the most transformative, decentralized learning experiences I had. And again, it was because I positioned myself as having lived experience and having value because of that. And this program was not structured in a way to recognize that, to ask for that. But again, I held space for myself to do that. And the beautiful thing about doing this is that when you do this for yourself, you're helping shifting mindsets and ways of thinking in a way that allow people to bring that away and to think of this next time they engage with other people. You hold space to bring in more people like you, more people who experience barriers, and having others understand that you know what, they carry value in this space, and their lived experience is part of that. Whew, that was a lot. I'll just kind of summarize what we just talked about before we dive into questions. I haven't been reading the chat, so I'll jump over there now, but we started with understanding decolonization. So I wanted to share a working definition of decolonization, and then I wanted to share an example of how, when we understand colonization and how colonization has shaped the way we exist today, how that can inform the ways that we unpack, again, the ways that we exist today, and apply it in the way that we live. So for example, taking 4-day work weeks. I know that's not accessible to most people, but scheduling time to be on the land, taking time to journal or to plan dream trips that are nature oriented. All of those things are valuable ways to use our time. And we can apply it. It doesn't need to be reduced to paper and policy. It needs to be incorporated into how we exist and treat others. And then I spoke to how colonization and then decolonization of mentorship relationships can shape the way that we relate to one another in more holistic and in more inclusive ways. Decentralizing learning, I spoke a bit to how and where we can find mentors, and just some tips on ways that we can spark those relationships. Articulating your values and needs for respect. This is really important when we're engaging in new relationships, and when we're thinking about making it as accessible and inclusive and safe as possible. When we do have those and start those relationships. And then finally, asserting your lived experience. So reframing our understanding of self-worth, and communicating that self-worth to others and that self-value to others. So, wow, I've been talking for a while. Let's transition into some questions and answers. Let me open the chat. I don't know if someone from the YR team is moderating these questions. If not, I can just kind of go back and check.
Be happy to share some of the questions that have come up. Thank you so much for that insightful presentation. There's so much pouring in, so let's get started. There's a comment here of someone that's currently running a reverse mentorship program, and they want to acknowledge the racial importance of that must be happening in the dynamic of the partnership. But the question is as follows: what can be done to make sure that all people feel seen in ways they might not have believed they needed? Mm-hmm. We are discussing, and they also say we're discussing how to tackle uncommon work discussions, but what else can easily be put in place?
The respect guidelines, very easy to put in place. And what's beautiful about it is that, for example, Cyrus, stop it. When we use these, I have every new team member fill this out. And the rest of the team is required to read this as a new team member joins us. Then we can confirm, yes, we've read this. Yes, we understand this is how you exist and this is what you need from us. And the new team member then reads the rest of the teams, and they too can understand how we all need to be treated differently. For example, I do not work on weekends. I just make that commitment because I'm on her time on weekends. But there's a lot of my team members who love working on weekends. They think it's the best time to work. And so we're able to hold space to articulate that, to have a discussion when we bring these to discussion. But we also have receipts. So when someone isn't being respected, they now have a tool that they can start that conversation and maybe even just mention, hey guys, I just want to bring us back to my takai didn't mio tatao. I didn't feel I was respected in this instance. I'm adding this to my takai de mio tatao now because I recognize this is something that is important to me. So we're also able to respond to the fluidity of our needs and understanding of self. We use this with a lot of different clients, and especially with clients where urgency culture, where fear culture is creating real barriers for people to exist authentically in this organization. This is one tool that we bring to those organizations that is a very quick, kind of very responsive and then proactive way to mitigate and navigate those experiences. So I just want to bring it back to this. Again, we have our statement, and then we have our, this is kind of the example that we use for everyone. And I'll share the slide deck now so that y'all can see that.
Anyone want to ask a question by unmuting themselves? We welcome that as well. And I just also wanted to bring attention for those who may have forgotten or who are just joining us for part 2 that that Lisa is creating some visual notes of the presentation. So we'll be able to share that as a resource as well. If you want to check out Lisa's square, you can see the work that that Lisa's done so far.
Hey, Larissa, I'm Sammy. I wrote in the chat, but I feel like might as well just talk in person. I just want to say, like, you are amazing and very inspiring. I was also a young parent, and just the fact that you can have a space to bring your child with you to learn. Like, I've tried that and had people be like, no, you're not allowed to have your child, not allowed to have your child in your space. And it's very unfortunate being a mom, because you want to do the best you can on both sides. You know, you want to take care of your child and do the work that you want to do. I just wanted to ask, is there like learning opportunities for someone that's not an ancestor or another culture to like learn what you're putting out? Because like, honestly, I'd love to learn more of what you do and like be able to share those experiences with other people, especially in my workplace.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Sammy. And I'm so sorry to hear about your experiences. Yeah, like as a young mother, I definitely had those experiences. And there weren't all like it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There were some there were some spaces where they were really resistant to the idea of having a child in that space. But I found that using that framework of respect, and again, coming to those spaces of this is how I need to be respected. How can I respect you by doing this? I found helped change the tone of those conversations very quickly and signaled that there's a reciprocal interest for respect here. And oftentimes, and I was able to come to those conversations by first thinking about, well, what is respect to me, especially when I have my daughter in those spaces? Well, in some of my workplaces, it looks like having a basket of toys for when people need to bring their children in, or for whatever reason children are in the space. It looks like having even a workplace policy that allows for caregivers to take time off. Because what I found in a lot of our clients is that, and again, this gets back to worldview and cultural experiences, a lot of policies only let you take off time for caregiving when it's your children or spouse and immediate nuclear family. That doesn't work when we think about cultures that have multiple generations living under one roof. It often came to the point where caregivers could not take out time. And then that gets down to marital, to the privileged of married people, to the privilege of people who have nuclear families and who exist in the dominant cultural way that we see here. And so those are just some really quick responses. And then how to stay connected. I have my slide up for how to stay connected with our work. I personally post a lot. Future Ancestor Services post quite a bit about the resources. You can actually scroll through our Instagram and you'll see a lot of research, and then our website as well. We're available for hire and speaking. We have a very diverse, absolutely amazing team. One of my understandings of success as a business owner is like being able to say I love you to everyone I work with. And I can honestly say that I do. So I really enjoy the work that we do, and we focus a lot on how we do our work. So that when we do come for consulting, training, speaking opportunities, that we're able to to demonstrate that we're walking the talk. We're not just saying do this, this, and this. So I hope that offers some useful resources. And Mo's on the call. Thank you, Mo. Mo is one of our alchemists, and they've just shared some resources.
Where's Mo?
Mo's right there. Say hi, Mo.
Hi, Mo.
Oh, great. Oh, there's Mo. I'm sorry, I am recovering from a brain injury, so it is quite hard to read the text. Sarah or Kathy, Katie, would you be able to?
I'd be happy to share one more question if you have time for that one.
Yeah.
So thanks so much with your opening in terms of just connecting lived experience with academic knowledge. It's brilliant and definitely needs more discussion. And with your lived example and context of decolonizing time, I think was really great and resonated with a lot of people. There's a question here that it's a bit curious about hearing your perspective on respecting perspective and current mentors' time. How do you set accurate and respectful standards for time commitment?
Yes, that's a big one. I'm gonna grab this book. Oh, okay. Okay. I've been dethroned. The equity myth. I'll share it in the chat. Racialization and indigeneity at Canadian universities. Dr. Lauren Foster contributed to this. Anakshi Dua, who's also York University, Carl E. James, Francis Henry. These are all active York University community members. They published this in, I believe, 2018, still very relevant. But this book helped me understand better the time restraints and the disproportionate expectations and responsibilities that are placed on Black, Indigenous, and racialized professors and staff members in universities. It's very interesting, actually. Dr. Foster has done research before and actually actively works at York University on this topic, but where he examined why Black, Indigenous, and racialized faculty, aspiring faculty, were not getting professor tenureship positions. And it came down to the policy, the rating policy that universities use for an applicant. And what was happening was that Black, Indigenous, and racialized academics and researchers were often and are often focusing our research on community-based problems, where our main concern of review is by community. That's where the value is held in our review process is. And so you'll see a lot of Black, Indigenous, and racialized researchers, professors publishing in open access, publicly accessible journals and magazines and doing their research within community because the government and funding spaces fail to meet our needs. But because there's so much focus on that community-oriented research, what happens is that people who are not burdened, who do not experience these barriers within community and within communities are more open to explore hypothetical research. They're more open to publishing in academic journals where it costs $300 to access the article. And so what happens is that by the rating system, the Western journal publications are what are deemed the only kind of way that a professor or researcher can demonstrate their value. And what ends up happening is that we get white professors teaching African studies courses. We get white professors teaching Indigenous studies courses, beating out much more qualified Black and Indigenous researchers and applicants. But because of that policy and worldview enshrined within that policy, those experiences are deemed irrelevant and nice to have, but not necessary for the qualification of a tenured professor. And so I'm sorry, again, my memory was really affected by my brain bleed. And so I can't really remember why I was talking about that. But this is something that, the equity myth. When I understand more of this, when I started to understand what these professors go through, what these people in now mentor positions and mentor status, what they go through to get there, I was much more and became much more sympathetic to the pressures of their time. And again, this is where it comes, this is where what can I do for you becomes so important when we're looking for establishing, fostering those mentorship relationships, is coming to that space, acknowledging, I recognize you have so much work on your plate that other professors and staff do not, because you are one of very few that Black, Indigenous, and racialized students can come to. So what can I do for you to alleviate some of the burdens on your time? And that's what I really hope that you take away from this is coming to those relationships, offering versus just trying to extract from these people. And again, I am positioning myself as having value when I ask, what can I do for you? I have skills that are valuable to you. How can I help you? Sometimes you'll get a no, I don't need any help. That's fine too. Don't take that personally. But asking that question will eventually get you the kind of mentorship relationship where we are seeing a more reciprocal understanding of value and what people have to offer. So I hope that addresses the question explicitly enough.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larissa. We hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation, of course. We encourage folks to stay connected. We are going to transition to a performance from our next spoken word performer. And so I'm going to introduce Eddie Lartey. Eddie is a Hamiltonian wordsmith who blends creative wordplay and storytelling to create a heartfelt experience for his audience. He details stories of love, struggle, and triumph. But at the end of the day, he is just a man with a smile who likes to make people smile with words. We're going to turn it over to you, Eddie. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Perfect. So I'm actually going to start off with a poem, and then we're going to go into a discussion. So, the darkest pity party. Me and my shadow exchange horror stories about being Black. I say to my shadow, I envy you. No one ever questions the quantity of your Blackness. You're never too Black or not Black enough. You are always just simply Black, without in question, without interrogation. I envy how your hands have never felt the chill of cuffs, never been presumed guilty until proven dead, because no matter how hard they try, they can never kill a shadow. And my shadow says to me, I know we both know what it's like to be a walking chalk outline. A shadow's place either on the ground or against a wall, and everything that makes me uniquely beautiful is robbed of me in the nighttime. The warmth of my personality and flesh become the tone of nightmares. This skin, nothing more than the fingerprint of a violent night. They label me an angry Black man, base my whole existence on throwing shade, and why wouldn't I be angry? I hate the way I stick out in white spaces. I try and comfort my shadow. I say, I wish I knew my history the way you did. I envy how close you are to the earth and our roots. You are the origin of Black love. The melanin in a shadow is a vow. Watch how easily two shadows become one flesh, and I've never known a love like this. You actually get to flip the script, appropriate their movements and call it normal. My shadow says, call it conformity. Call it being puppeted. Call it being spoon-fed a culture without spice. Us dark-skinned individuals have never had the crown of normalcy, never been given the luxury of tears. Even though it's clear, I feel the weight of everything on top of me. We know what it's like, the burden of being Black and strong, and it's maddening. This code switching. In some lights, a shadow has to split itself in two to fit into a workplace, or it's voiceless, tokenized, present at every board meeting and cannot speak. Our glass ceilings the floor to be stepped on and stepped over, give new meaning to overshadowed, and we bond over these memories and pre-written destinies, a connection so close it is almost physical. Our kinship, Siamese-like, our brotherhood so real we nod in verification upon meeting one another. Or on some nights, boxers know that the shadow is the only person you have fighting with you. But cops know the best way to make shadows scatter swirling lights. Thank you, everyone. My name is Eddie. I'm here with Nia and Tanya. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Nia, please.
Hello. Thank you, Eddie. My name is Nia Reed, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And it's been a really great day. And I just want to thank you all for taking the time to stay with us for a little bit of sharing from us. I'm just going to keep it light.
Oh. Yeah, Nia, I think we're going to throw to you a little bit later in the program, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. We want Hamilton U Poets to close the event, and so we're going to shift now into our youth program panel, and then we'll throw it back to the three of you to come back and close off the day, if that works.
That absolutely works. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. No, we're so happy you could be here, Eddie. We're so happy that we can showcase you and then also have an opportunity to showcase your work with Hamilton U Poets. So I'm actually right now going to turn it over to my colleague, Kamau, who's going to lead our youth program panel.
Thank you. And thank you, Eddie. That was an incredible piece, very powerful. Hello, everyone. I'm Kamau Davis-Sock. I'm a research assistant with YouthREX. Today, we are very excited to have three more amazing speakers that will delve further into the topic of critical youth mentorship practices. We have Matthew Teitmeyer, Manager of Innovation for Pinecrest Queensway Community Health Center. Patty O'Sullivan, the project leader for Connect's Youth Mentorship, as a part of the York Region District School Board. And Nicole Anise Nash, the Executive Director of the Finding Our Power Together. Unfortunately, at this time, we might not have enough time for questions. We will be sharing the slide after the event, and we will be sharing the links to each program and organization's website and social media channels in the chat box during the presentations. With no further delay, I will allow Matthew to start.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to speak to you today. As Kamau said, I'm from the Pinecrest Queensway Community Health Center in Ottawa. We run a lot of different youth programs, and I'll quickly touch on them before I jump into sort of the question at hand. So first, we run a program called Pathways to Education. Many of you may be familiar with it. There's about 30 different sites across Canada, and we're privileged to have one of them at our site in the West End of Ottawa. We work with about 400 students each year to help them graduate from high school and go on to post-secondary. So we're working with high school students from grade 9 to 12, all from low-income communities in the West End of Ottawa. And the goal is to eliminate poverty through education. And we have sort of 4 pillars of support. There's tutoring and mentorship, one-on-one support, and financial support. So it's a very holistic program that's had great success. Although the program isn't specifically mentoring, and many of our programs aren't, quote unquote mentorship programs, mentorship plays a part in all of them, I would say. So with our Pathways program, we do have volunteer tutors, upwards of 60 a year pre-pandemic. It's lower than that now. And as well as mentors who work with our youth in more of a group-based recreational and leadership kind of program way. We also we're over the last couple of years looking at innovations and how do we explore and expand our program, explore expanding and enhancing our program using digital means. I think all of us are doing that, but that's something that we're really trying to focus on. Our Pathways program is only in the West End of Ottawa, and so if you're lucky enough to live in our catchment area, then you have all these great supports, but there's so many other students, young people out there that don't have it. So we're trying to find ways that we can support other students in the Ottawa area. We also have a program called the Somali Youth Support Program. We have a large Somali population in our neighborhood. And that program is specifically, as the name suggests, for Somali youth. It's a leadership program. It's a cultural program. We have a parent component and an advisory committee, all of which are from the Somali community, as is our staff and mentors. And it's been quite successful as well. We have a program called United Sisters, which is a girls only space. Again, it's kind of a leadership recreational program. It's for younger girls, younger youth, aged 10 to 15. And then lastly, we have our Together We Can program. And our Together We Can program is the one that is mostly a mentorship program. It's funded through the Black Youth Action Plan, which is a Ontario provincial funding program that supports Black-led and Black supporting organizations. As a community health center, we have a lot of clients from the Black community, and so we're fortunate enough to get this funding. And that program is a leadership and mentorship program. We had a lot more mentors in the past pre-COVID, and having moved online, it's shifted a little bit. So most of our programming is more a presentation style, but it's a Black only space. So all of our presenters come from the Black Canadian community. And the idea is to expose our youth to role models from different backgrounds. They come in and talk about their careers and career paths, their experiences, and on different themes such as wellness and career exploration, and you name it. It's really youth focused and youth led. Part of the program is a leadership peer leader program, where we have a group of 10 youth that we work very closely with to develop their skills, and they really work to help us to mold the program to what they and their peers want and need. When Katie asked me to speak about our critical mentorship practices, I struggled with sort of how to approach that, and I sort of landed on what are the principles and values that our organization and our programs sort of use as touchstones. And our organization's values, I think 3 of which are sort of stand out for me are accessibility, inclusion, client-centered. We're always, in terms of accessibility, we're always looking, how do we reduce barriers, ask questions like who is not here, and try to engage those who are most in need or most vulnerable. Inclusion really starts from internally looking at who are our staff, who are our volunteers, how do they reflect our clients, what can they do to support our clients' needs. We do volunteer training with all of our volunteers, and anti-oppression and trauma-informed approaches are included in that training. And client-centered is also very important, getting youth input on content of our programming. Increasingly, we're incorporating the youth into the planning, implementation, evaluation, and promotion of our programming. And that's been really fun and really powerful for the youth. And also our programming is, we try as much as possible to make it culturally reflective in that, listening to the youth and the youth voice and their needs and wants, and is a big piece of that as well. Two sort of, I guess, frameworks that we use at Pinecrest Queensway, particularly in our youth program, are motivational interviewing. And that one is really comes from the addictions and mental health kind of sector. And it's really about helping people to make changes that they want to make in their lives. And again, it really sort of meshes well with the values I mentioned, as well as the next framework, which is the Search Institute's developmental relationship principles, which are really key. I'll touch more on the Search Institute because that's the one we really use with our youth. The DRF, which I call it Developmental Relationship Framework, has 5 principles: express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, and expand possibilities. Express care is one that I think comes easy to most, workers or most people that want to work with youth. It's all about, being there for the youth, being dependable, being friendly, encouraging, showing that you believe in the youth. That one comes pretty easy. Challenging growth, that one can be a little more challenging. It's about having high expectation, letting the youth know that we think they're capable, and encouraging to sort of meet their potential. It's about pushing them to strive for things that maybe they initially don't think they can achieve. It's also about holding them accountable and supporting them to reflect when they make mistakes or don't achieve what they're hoping to achieve. Providing support is, again, that's another one that kind of comes easy, but there's also a piece that we found in the past before we kind of embraced that our staff in particular would often do for the youth instead of supporting the youth to learn the skills, develop the skills to do for themselves. And that's a key piece of that principle. Sharing power, as I mentioned, is something that we've increasingly embraced, and that's about including the youth, collaborating with them, and giving them opportunities to lead. And lastly, expand possibilities is about inspiring the youth. It's about opening their eyes to their potential and the possibilities that exist for them, which I think some young people from low income or racialized backgrounds sometimes struggle with. And lastly, it's also about connecting them and opening up networks for them and connecting them with opportunities. I think I'll pause there and pass it back on to Kamau for the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Patty, I think you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Patty O'Sullivan. I'm with the York Region District School Board. I'm part of the Inclusive Schools and Community Services Department, and I was fortunate to have led our Connects Newcomer Youth Mentorship Program. This was a 3-year funded program through Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. We ran this program between 2018 and 2021. It was a research-based project that would be followed from inception until the end, where we would examine different mentorship models that we were delivering within the school board to high school youth, either enrolled in high school or coming into high school. We know that high school is difficult for many youth. However, research has shown us that newcomer youth entering high school face a whole other bunch of issues, concerns, issues around mental health and well-being. So the focus of our 3-year project really was to pilot a project in the hopes of better addressing and supporting the needs of our newcomer high school youth than the existing programs within York Region. This was a school-based program located in our school board, again, focusing on providing programming in the schools focused around mentorship. Long-term and short-term goals really were to address the needs of the high school youth, try to get them more connected, more engaged, more familiar with the atmosphere of high school, more connected with their community, knowing that this would also decrease issues around mental health and increase feelings of well-being and connectedness. So what we found going forward is that all the assumptions and the ideas that we had going into the program around mentorship programs kind of stopped right there. So one of our key findings that we like to share is we had to assume nothing. We assumed we could go in and offer a traditional historical youth mentorship program where we would have people from the community coming in and working with our youth. Perhaps or possibly they may have shared social identities, cultural experiences. However, when we realized what we were doing in a school and the limited amount of time that we had, we knew that we couldn't do our due diligence with regards to, accessing people from the community and bringing them in. This actually played to our favor because what we found out when we did our shift to develop a peer mentorship program in the Connects program was that our youth, once they signed up, when we were doing our interview process, all of the newcomers who signed up for the program wanted to be the mentor. Very few people wanted or considered the idea of a mentee, because what that did, and we've heard about it today, was created that power imbalance, that hierarchy of belonging, that youth wanted and felt valued that they could be offering something to other newcomers youth. So for us, that was a huge finding and something that we thought was really worthwhile, because again, at that point, it focused on the assets that the youth would be bringing forward to the program, as opposed to what they needed or the help that they needed. So by creating a multi-directional program where we had newcomer youth assisting other newcomer youth that was totally student focused, we were able to offer a program that we felt and our study showed met most of the criteria and the needs of the youth. When we talk about assuming nothing too, we also ended up offering our program during lunch periods. We also found that students didn't want to do a mentorship program after school. A lot of our students had extra responsibilities at home, maybe with their siblings, maybe with their parents, maybe they were working multiple jobs. So to offer a mentorship program outside of school wasn't something that was going to work either. We also found out that having a mentorship program with peers within the school in some instances worked and some didn't. We've also found out, and one of the terms that our research team through YouthREX found was called a hierarchy of competence. And again, that was something that kind of reinforced what we were seeing with the relationships between our youth when we were thinking of doing a typical mentor-mentee relationship. So again, the relationships between all of our newcomer youth, identifying their needs and having them actually tell us what their programming would be like, what it is that they would like, offer them the opportunity to showcase their skills and their assets and to share their leadership with the other high school youth. Engage youth in all parts of the programming. We start right with a needs assessment, what they would like to see out of the program. If language was an issue, we always had translators there, but we would also have pictures around the room of different opportunities and activities so that they could express to us what it is that they would like to see, what they would want to learn more about, whether it was trips around their community or going downtown, accessing community centers, libraries. Those were all the things that we made sure that we built into the program. We also ensured that in each program day, we had some type of a community circle where everybody would talk and share. Not only did this work on their communication skills, which was one of the goals of many of the students, it also created a sense of community and connectedness, something that we were working towards with our overall goals. The other thing, another learning that we took out of it was buy-in, ensure buy-in from the schools, from the staff, from the community members. And this was really important as well. The more people that we got on board, the more closer we were to achieving the goals for our students. Because we were doing it within a school, it was important that we weren't just a standalone program that happened in a classroom, that the principals were aware of us, that the teachers were aware, that guidance, if they ran into a new family, they would say, here's a great program, you should go and join. Our settlement workers in the school were also a really good source in supporting us and what we were doing. And so then those relationships again really helped us further the program and the goals that we wanted to achieve. The other thing too that we really found out over the past 3 years was the of course, and everybody knows this, about being flexible. Within the period of this project, we faced teacher action, we faced COVID, we faced shifting everything from in person to online. And for youth that may not necessarily be familiar with change or feel comfortable with change, these were some major shifts in thinking and delivery and how we had to continue to make those connections and reinforce those relationships amongst the students and also amongst the staff with the students. So going forward, we really came out of the program knowing that we had to be flexible in what we did. We also found out as we piloted different types of programming that in order to create that relaxed connectedness, it had to happen outside of classroom time. So during a lunch period was fine. For part of the program with another group in another high school, we were allowed to go in during instructional time and then deliver a program. Even though it was a similar program, because it was during instructional time, 9 to 11 every Monday, we found that, and our studies showed that there wasn't as much responsiveness from the students. The relationships weren't there. They didn't feel that they were as connected and confident during that type of a delivery, because it was very, and I call it edu-focused, because there were teachers there, they were in their desk, they were still expected to put up their hands. There wasn't that relaxed atmosphere that we were able to create during lunch where people chose to be there. So again, another learning going forward. Yeah, and so our project ended in March, and we'll be starting up a new program for our newcomer youth by the next couple of weeks going forward.
Thank you so much, Patty. That was great. And then Nicole.
Ani, Nanabojo, Zonje, Winishe, Wabagwana, Quaidin, Dishikas. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Snash. I'm the co-founder and director of Finding Our Power Together. So Finding Our Power Together started as a really grassroots youth movement that began as a way to support Indigenous youth who were mobilizing already to support other youth that were already kind of taking on that mentorship role. And so at the time, I had been working with a group of youth in Nibenamik, which is a remote First Nation community, and they were experiencing large numbers of deaths by suicide. And so they wanted to take on mentorship opportunities with young people in their community, but did not necessarily have the qualifications or skills to be able to kind of address the intense mental health aspects that were, happening in their community, largely due to colonialism and social isolation. So Finding Our Power Together started as a way to support those young people to become mentors in their community, and is now a registered charity that serves Indigenous youth across Canada. And largely our role in the lives of young people are to walk alongside them along their self-determined path, particularly around their wellness goals. And so our main avenues to do that support is through cultural connection, doing cultural activities, cultural teachings, offering, cultural experiences that young people are seeking to develop their wellness, and providing psychoeducation. So trying to address the suicide epidemic that we are seeing in northern remote First Nation communities through psychoeducation and skills building in mental health, as well as relationship building. And so that's largely what our mentorship program is all about, is really developing those relationships with young people that are reciprocal, that model that appropriate behavior, that enable young people to have an outlet that they might not have in their own community or within their community, and to build connections not only to other people, but to all of creation and all of life. So we've developed our mentorship approach, really trying to take in mind what Indigenous young people, sorry, could you go back again? Thank you. So we really try to develop our mental health approach to be really focused on life promotion, but really teaching appropriate skills that are helpful in sort of saving lives and dealing with distress. So our braided approach came out of a large research study that we did over the course of the last 2 years, where we did countless literature reviews, systematic literature reviews, and key consultant interviews, and then piloted the approach in our mental health programming. And so what this approach entails is really taking together Indigenous worldviews and healing practices with youth-centered or youth care-focused approach, as well as some of the mainstream mental health skills, such as the ones found in DBT or dialectic behavior therapy. And so what we found in applying these together is that we actually had a very strong mentorship approach, that we were able to offer mental health guidance and psychoeducation through a relational framework. Could you go to the next slide now? So in terms of thinking about our mentorship program, we do mentorship throughout all of our programs, and we offer largely group programs that are meant to enhance cultural connection and have that psychoeducation piece. So we do that through a program called Building Our Bundle. And for those who maybe are unfamiliar with that terminology, a bundle is a traditional collection of ceremonial items that someone might carry with them throughout their life path that helps them to connect with spirit and engage in healing practices. And so our program, while it's not actually giving folks a physical bundle, is meant to be a bundle of skills and a bundle of teachings that can help guide them in their life. So as part of the Building Our Bundle program, all of our participants also get one-on-one mentorship to work more closely with those skills development for their own goals. So what we've been finding in that program is that what's made our program kind of different from psychotherapy or different kinds of maybe education-based mentorship programs is that we are really trying to meet youth where they're at and work with them in terms of their own goals. And this might mean offering academic support, but it might mean helping to connect them with traditional healers or helping them to understand how to approach a ceremony or a ceremonial teacher. Or a lot of the work that we do is psychoeducation. So really teaching them how to regulate, especially in this time of COVID, where we find that everyone is having a high anxiety and things are so uncontrollable. So really teaching and modeling those mental health skills that can kind of get us through, help us regulate and get us through to the next phase, and then work on larger scale goals. We use a therapeutic relationship model. So I like to call our mentorship program a relational psychoeducation program, because it's the working with and building the relationship between the mentor and the mentee that really ends up being the intervention. And so we are doing therapeutic work in our sessions, but it's largely through an interactive manner in which I'm doing the same activities that you're doing. I'm decentralized myself as the, sorry, I just saw the chat. Decentering myself as the expert and allowing for the youth to really drive the process. We also share gifts for an interdisciplinary team. So we work with a team of interdisciplinary mentors who are from a range of disciplines, whether that be social work, child and youth care practice. We have educators, and we have Indigenous community workers who potentially don't have the academic credentials, but have lived experience in supporting well-being with youth. And so we work as a team to really support our clients in a holistic way. We also mentor in various places. So it's not only in the one-on-one interactions that we are working with our young people, it's in the group context, it's when we're doing fun games, it's, kind of mentoring on the go, which we find to be really effective. And also having a clear approach has really helped us because it allows our team to kind of grow and invite new people in while still having kind of a framework for understanding what mentorship looks like and what it is not. And being really clear about that really helps us to have clear and consistent relationships with our young people. I encourage you to check us out if you haven't heard about us before. And Miigwech, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was all great. Thank you to all the speakers and all the poets that we had today. It's been very informative. I think everyone's learned and gained something from this experience. Thank everybody, and I'll pass it on to Cyril.
We have another great performance. Katie, who are we going to hear from next?
We are going to hear from Hamilton U Poets. We are moving into our closing, so we invite you all to stay with us a little bit longer. Hamilton U Poets was created in 2012, a community grounded in the belief that all people have important stories to tell and on a shared love of creative expression through the written and spoken word. Hamilton U Poets is going to take us through some of their learnings that they can share with us about mentorship or thinking about mentorship, and then are going to close with a performance. So I'll turn it over to you, Nia.
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me all right? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, my name is Nia Reed, and I know it's the end of the day, so I'm gonna keep things light. Just to introduce myself, I'm a Vancouver-born Capricorn with Aries rising. I'm a collaborative stargazer, and more importantly, I'm an artist. But for the last 10 years, along with my two colleagues who are joining me today, Eddie Lartey and Tanya Panetta, we have been impacting the city of Hamilton by providing a platform for young poets, which over a span of 8 years, we impacted just under 24,000 young people with a 92% graduation rate. There were so many great things. If you're not reading poetry, I fully encourage you to. But we've gathered today to just talk a little bit about values, and in the face of COVID and challenging times, how you might re-examine those values, what you truly believe in, and what are the steps that are most essential to you and your growth moving forward. And this isn't going to be an exhaustive list. It's just one of the ways that we found in a really challenging time, how we approached it. So I'm just going to hand it over to Eddie.
Perfect. So, yeah, for us, we really started by looking at our team, our growth as individuals, and what we as a collective wanted our future to look like. And a lot of that is a difference in the things that we've experienced. So particularly over the last year, so some of the first steps that we took in the process was something we like to call cutting and clearing. And then we ended up doing writing some of our goals down. One list was for our personal lives. The other was for some of the things we wanted professionally. The last is what we wanted to create as a team. And then lastly, we're going to be looking at our mission statement. And our mission statement, as Nia mentioned, was written almost 10 years ago. So we've really had to reconsider whether any of this is still important to us. So the purpose of this session is for us to I want to say, let's go with reverse engineer our process. So we looked at our mission statement and found that it was no longer relevant. And we're still identifying what some of our core beliefs and what some things that we find essential to us are. So our mission statement as follows is, we're a community grounded in the belief that all people have important stories to tell. We are people from different backgrounds, experiences, who've come together to understand the importance of our own stories and those of others. So we can all pursue a chosen path and work to make the places that we call home just and equitable. Our relationships began at height based on a shared love of creative expression through written and spoken word. Thank you. We tend to find that for a strong mission statement, it really has to contain 4 key elements: what our inspiration is, the plausibility of the mission, the specificity, and the value as well. With that being said, I'm going to hand it over to T.
Yes, so overall, the mission statement gives people an idea of what your organization does, how it does it, and its core values. And values are the why of what you do. And you can lose sight of those values in challenging times, for example, COVID. But if your values are truly part of your core beliefs, it will be a guiding light, providing the how you'll deal with challenging times. And if you see there's some stuff moving in my background, my cat is trying to break into my room and my brother let her in. Back to values. Your values are something you believe in, and if this is authentic, your core values will make a challenge or something you perceive as a bad moment an opportunity that is right for something awesome. So these guiding principles provide an organization and its team members with purpose and direction. So generally speaking, organizational values are thought of as kind of like expression of your values and your purpose of like helping everyone who encounters your work and to understand what you're all about. And it also serves as a place to remind you and your team why you continue walking in the door each morning, why you show up. And with this, knowing what is important to our team, the legacy we will leave, what our participants need, and truly what each of us wants. This was a process in and of itself. And so part of the process, team members made daily lists of what they wanted for themselves, personally, professionally, and then together as a team, what goals we wanted to achieve together.
So I'll take it from there, T. And I think like just as we're talking about this, you know, we are talking about doing this in a reverse order of what we went. But what was really clear to us, you know, in 2020 and 2021, we experienced some of our greatest wins, but also some of our greatest challenges. And the wins were absolutely amazing, but for our challenges, it literally forced us to go back to square one. So, you know, looking at what everybody on our team, you know, and where I was going back in, you know, when you have a team that still wants to go forward when you're starting back at square one, you know, it's a huge gift, but we really needed to make sure that as a young organization that is predominantly run by young leaders, what did each person on that team want? What did they want for themselves personally? What did they want for themselves professionally? And then collectively, what did we want to build together? So with that, you know, that's our sort of our middle step of like defining what we wanted. But before we had to go through that, we also had to really dive deep and acknowledge what had happened. What were the hurts that we had in the past? What were the hurts that we had in the present? And how do we cut and clear that so that we can actually build on a fresh page? Because some of that stuff can get really clouded and influenced by the past. So setting goals on top of something that might still be painful or might still be in your purview isn't necessarily the fruitful gains for great artistic work or for setting goals as a team of how we're going to move forward. Eddie, do you think you could just sort of take us through how we went into cutting and clearing?
Perfect. I feel like we're using the term cutting and clearing, and a lot of people might not know what that looks like, but here's what it looks like for us. So first we gather as a team with our pads and our papers, because we're poets, and a clean sheet of paper. And then we have a workshop. Within that workshop, we want everyone to write out with no edits, no holding back, what is done as a team, what is incomplete, what is left unsaid, what is unhealed. Second step is on a new sheet of paper, we ask people to write out the situation as we ideally wanted it to be, all of our hopes, goals, and wishes, and we ask them to consider how this would feel. Because feelings is essentially one of the cruxes of, again, we're poets, we're emotional. What other support is needed to make this possible. Next, we look at both sheets of paper and at our own actions in both of these situations, and how are we being? What was productive and what was non-productive? On the third sheet of paper, we write down our own list. This is not simply an act of how the actions happen as a team, but how these actions impacted our lives for the better, hopefully. The fifth step is really providing a space for each member to share, to be heard. As we've gone through a series of lists, we want them to really articulate where they're at, what they were feeling, and what their hopes and dreams were for that. And the last section is, once it's all written down and fleshed out, we take the first sheet of paper with what's left unsaid, what's left incomplete, and what's unhealed, and collectively rip it up, we burn it. We let it go, we acknowledge the space is now available to create something new. And in that something new, we hope to move forward as an organization. T, can you talk about what we do after that?
All right, so cutting and clearing isn't necessarily like a one-shot process. It's a commitment to be, on the court for yourself and for others. It provides a space to embrace and create actual core values and create new goals, and together determine how we move forward. So when a group of individuals share these values, it creates a bond that can weather storms and organizational turbulence. A synergy emerges amongst these like-minded people, and the workflow gives way to passion and untapped creativity. I know that sounds very rare because it was, but what I'm saying is that it creates connection within the team and creates a vulnerability that allows you to actually be real people with each other.
Yeah, I'm gonna just take it from there, T, because I think really what we're trying to get down to is so many of us have had such hard times, and how do we complete the past and how do we move forward? How do we sort of check in with our values and make Mondays less dreadful? And listen, I get that everybody on this call has been on here all day. It's been a wonderful day and rich of education and sharing. So I want to make your Monday a little less, a little more brighter, a little more lighter. And I'm gonna ask Tanya to share a poem with us. And I just want to thank and acknowledge everyone for staying on an extra 15, 20 minutes to hear us out. So thank you so much. And Tanya.
All right. The Moon's Manifesto. If a child asks if I'm really following them, tell them yes. One day, I saw the moon so big, it left a crater in my chest. I've coveted an ocean's worth of wonder since. I ascend into the night, Suspend time as if I were fossilized here, as if tonight is the night I choose not to descend and trap the world in infinite twilight. On nights the sky opens like a stage. My hope finds sanctuary where it feels far away from here. I let myself hallucinate into visions of its fruition after a dormant youth, dreamless and tired. I treat myself to desire and let this inherited guilt turn to sand. I have been alive as long as there have been grandmothers. I remember watching my grandmother bless her own water, and honey drunk from the memory, I wonder if I will be some kind of magic too. So long as we have grandmothers, there will always be stories and stories of the moon. She musters enough English to tell me she loves me, and the belly of my mother's suffering swells into confusion. Gravity has a way of keeping things in place for a very long time, and sadness is something similar. My lineage is filled with half-moon truths and eclipse recollections. I was born with something already eroding and breathless, leaving a yearning that eats the husk of illusion and yet a bellowing for something more. I offer to fold this persisting ache into stardust. Moonlight has a way of softening our most wicked faults, convincing the most jagged rock into skipping stones. I was told to imagine light. Like the scorch of early July, I fill myself from the inside out. I let this hunger eat until it evolves into asteroid. This John F. Kennedy moon landing devotion. I rename my sadness Apollo and send it up in smoke. The ocean moves at my will, but call it by name and it will come to you too. After the crash of the tide, I'm learning to pull back what is rightfully mine, seashells, fish spine, and joy. I am earthbound like you. Your orbit and my suspension work in tandem. I plant my feet in the ground and root. I decide to grow from the ground up. Let this head rewild, unfoil, bear fruit, unhinge, and howl prayer after prayer. My greatest gift to the world is in my fullest form, where you are asked to untether from what has held you back all this time. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that. That really set a beautiful tone for kind of bringing us close to the end of the day. I want to thank you, Nia, Eddie, Tanya, for these wonderful words of wisdom. I'm now going to ask our partner from Mentor Canada, Veronique Church-Duplessis, to share some closing thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think I will start just by simply thanking everyone who attended today and participated in this great event, including all the attendees coming from various programs and services across the country, as well as the keynote speakers, Rhodes and Larissa Crawford, the spoken word performers who offered us great insights and powerful testimonies into the power of mentoring and relationships. As well as practitioners and program staff who share their wisdom, their experiences, and their tips for all of us here, and most importantly, the YouthREX team who worked very hard to assemble this great lineup and insightful day. I'm going to keep it very, very short because I don't think I can add a lot more to what has already been said by all the presenters, but I think that what comes through for me at the end of the day is that mentoring is indeed one of the tools that we can use to help empower youth to realize their potential. And that should be based on their own values and their own expectation and their own goals, which are not necessarily those of the dominant white Western culture and values in which we live in Canada. And we also should be critical and recognize when mentoring programs and services are not doing that, that they're not promoting youth empowerment, and that historically and traditionally some mentoring programs have not served Black, Indigenous, and racialized youth well, and that they could have perpetuated harm. So the presenters today suggested a lot of tips and practices that can help us create mentoring opportunities that respect and empower youth and their communities and help youth work for social change. So I'm going to leave it at that. Very inspiring day, and thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for having us as well.
Thank you so much, Veronique. Thank you again to everyone On behalf of YouthREX, Mentor Canada, the York Research Chair in Youth and Context of Inequity, thank you all for being a part of today's conversation. We have a feedback form. If you have a moment and you'd like to share your feedback from today's event, we'd love to hear from you. And I also hope that you will visit YouthREX's website, youthrex.com, for access to resources and supports. You will also find on our Knowledge Hub recordings from this very event in the next week or so, as well as all of the resources that were shared by YouthREX, by our partners and our presenters and guests. And we really appreciate you sharing space so that we can have this really critical conversation and explore ways that we can work to advance youth well-being. Thank you again. Have a lovely day. And we look to the next teach-in where we can share space and learn with and from one another. Thank you so much.